Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt went head to head in their final clash last night. Here's what we learned. Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt are in the final week of the Tory leadership campaign. Next week, one will be named the new Prime Minister. Last night's debate lasted 90 minutes, with the candidates facing questions from the Sun newspaper readers. On the agenda was the Donald Trump racist tweet furore, personal matters and, of course, Brexit. What we learned. 1. Neither want to call Trump a racist. Asked about the growing row over Donald Trump's tweets telling 4 congresswomen to go back to the counties they came from, despite 3 of them being born in the USA. Current Prime Minister Theresa May swiftly condemned the comments on Monday as completely unacceptable, but despite the hopefuls to take her job agreeing, neither would condemn the tweets as racist. Jeremy Hunt called the remarks totally offensive, while Boris Johnson said they were unacceptable, but asked by The Sun's political editor Tom Newton-Dunn if they thought the comments were racist, neither candidate would say. Mr. Hunt said, "It is not going to help the situation to use that kind of language about the President of the United States." Mr. Johnson said, "You can take from what I said what I think about President Trump's words." 2. But both called Corbyn an anti-Semite. Both candidates were asked if Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn is personally anti-Semitic in the wake of the ongoing row in the party and the recent Panorama documentary. To applause, Mr. Hunt replied, "Unfortunately, he may be." Mr. Johnson said, "I think by condoning anti-Semitism in the way he does, I am afraid he is effectively culpable of that vice." 3. A snap election is not on the table. Mr. Johnson said he absolutely rules out the possibility of a snap election. He said, "I think it would be the height of folly. I think the people of this country are utterly fed up with politicians coming back to them offering referendums or elections." Mr. Hunt agreed, and said the Tories could face disastrous consequences if they called the country to the polls before the Brexit deadline on the 31st of October. But Mr. Hunt warned Mr. Johnson risked an accidental general election by sticking to his do-or-die Brexit deadline. 4. But a job for Boris's. With relations between the two men significantly friendlier than their last TV clash, it seems Mr. Hunt has a spot for Mr. Johnson on his cabinet if he gets the top job. Despite being the underdog, he said Mr. Johnson should have a major role in government, saying he could be Chancellor, Work and Pension Secretary or another very senior role in his cabinet. Mr. Johnson did not respond in kind. 5. Private lives are still not up for discussion. Mr. Johnson refused to say whether he intended to take his girlfriend, Carrie Simons, with him to number 10 if he got the job. Faced with questions about his private life since police were called to the flat he shares with Carrie, 31, during a row, Mr. Johnson has been increasingly pressed to open up and gain the public's trust. He said, "I've had a pretty ruthless rule on not commenting on that side of things and I don't intend, if I may, to break it after 30 years. 6. Tax cuts are still on the table. Mr. Johnson defended his plans to cut taxes for higher earners, saying it was odd people had criticized the plans. He said, "I do think it is a bit odd that there's been so much controversy when you consider that there are police inspectors, there are senior nurses, there are heads of maths departments who are now being captured paying the higher rate of tax." But Mr. Hunt warned of playing into the message the Labour Party seeks to project about the Conservatives being a party for the richest. 7. But ending the benefits freeze might not be. Neither candidate would say whether they'd end the benefits despite Work and Pension Secretary Amber Rudd warning that it was essential for the next Prime Minister. The government had said the freeze was due to end in 2020. 8. The candidates disagree over whether to cut immigrant numbers. Mr. Johnson refused to say whether he would bring immigration numbers down. He said, "I'm not going to get into some numbers game with you. What I think we will have is control, which is what the people voted for and it's high time we got it." Mr. Hunt was more direct, saying, "That's what people voted for, but they also voted with an expectation that overall levels of net migration would come down and I believe that people would think we were betraying the spirit of that Brexit referendum if we didn't find a way of bringing down overall numbers."